Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another amazing young woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hello, I'm Sathvega Somasundaram and I'm based in California. I'm a young teen and also an author, and I write a lot about speech differences, neurodiversity, and his ability just to raise awareness about these issues, especially in terms of children's books, just because they're just so underrepresented. So a bit about my story is that when I was younger, the hardest word for me to say was my own name. Not a presentation or a speech like usual, but just my name. And every first day of school felt very terrifying because I knew eventually the teacher would call me for attendance and pause for a second, say Sathvega, and look at me expectantly, and I would just already be panicking before I opened my mouth. I remember sitting in those classrooms rehearsing my name silently over and over again in my head, just trying to predict where I would get stuck. And sometimes I would say it really quickly before the stutter caught up to me. Sometimes I would pretend not to hear the teacher, and sometimes I would just pray they skipped me entirely. And when I did stutter, I became very hyper aware of everything around me. So the sound of chairs moving around, someone whispering, a classmate turning around, and just the awkward silence that set in that space felt a lot more worse than it probably actually was. And it's very strange how, as a child, just a few seconds can completely reshape the way you see yourself. Because eventually I stopped seeing my stutter as something I experienced, and I started to see just who I was. Not intelligent enough, not being confident enough, and not being normal enough. Or in this world where speaking fast and just speaking so efficiently and so freely is so standard that when someone struggles to speak or get things out, it's seen as outlandish. And that's kind of how I felt in that moment. And a lot of what hurt most was not just my speech impediment, but the shame that went with it. So this shame follows a lot of children and adults. Like in ways that we might underestimate. And especially with children, when they feel ashamed of their differences, they begin to silence themselves. This is the idea that changed my life, and ultimately the idea that inspired me to write a lot of the stories that I write today. Because silence never starts all at once. It happens very slowly and very periodically, and maybe it starts with a child stopping raising their hand and stops volunteering for answers, introducing themselves, participating, and just believing that their thoughts are never worth hearing. And eventually that becomes their identity, like me, like it was for mine for a little bit. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is that confidence is something children neither naturally have or don't have. But confidence is deeply shaped in how we represent ourselves and how we belong in society, and the messages children absorb from the world around them, especially through books and stories that we read from a very young age. And as a child, I loved so many books. I loved stories and reading, and I loved how they just pull you into this whole completely different world. But even while reading constantly, I noticed something was missing. I never saw characters that sounded like me or like a lot of the people that I interacted with. I never saw characters with speech impediments unless they were shown as nervous or being awkward, a little comedic in shows like we see. I rarely saw neurodivergent children or people disabled in these stories. And I think that absence is a lot more important than we realize. Children never see themselves or like them reflected positively in these stories, and they start assuming that they were never meant to be a hero of any of them. And that's kind of what pushed me into creating Zoya. So Zoya the Stuttering Star is the first book that I wrote in inspiration of the experiences I felt growing up, especially with stuttering, speech impediments, being how I was seen in society and how stuttering was viewed from society as a whole. And basically, it encapsulates how even speaking differently can truly be someone's superpower. And that's exactly what happens. The story is about this little girl with a speech impediment, and she eventually uses her voice, which becomes her superpower. And she becomes the best superhero in the whole entire world because of it. So, basically, I wanted to make a story where difference didn't exist with shame. It was something incredibly important to me, especially through the writing process. I didn't want it to kind of tell children that you need to overcome this big struggle to feel valuable. It should be something naturally that comes to you and you kind of learn from it. So, a lot of children internalize this. They internalize that being different makes them very burdensome. And I just wanted I wanted to learn so much more about it because it starts very early and it's a very psychological process. Before children even fully understand what identity is or any of that sort, they start to understand what exclusion is. And that realization pushed me into intentionally sharing stories that empower students. So students might what I hope is that students feel accepted and admired and included when they read my books and the pages of my books. And for decades, many children unconsciously learned from maybe a couple books that they've already read that normal is rewarded when difference is tolerated. And with Zoya, I really did not want this to happen. So I kind of also made a framework because of this, just so I wanted because to kind of speak to the public more, and I use Zoya as my framework just because for so many years, especially the last couple years, Zoya kind of kickstarting my writing journey and how I want books to be represented from now on, and how I want Zoya from my book to be a role model for a lot of young students that read it. I just want it to be an embodiment of how I want stories to maybe go from now. So I want Z to maybe stand for zero shame, because shame is often the first thing students and children absorb when they realize that they're different. And shame is very, very powerful. It convinces children to hide before they understand themselves, and that's a very, very dangerous hole to kind of get into. O in Zoya, I wanted to stand for own your voice. So, not once your voice becomes perfect or sounds polished and whatnot, but just now, just exactly how it is, because you can do wonders with exactly who you are now. From Zoya, I also want Y to stand for your difference is your strength. And I know that phrase sounds a little cliche, but you can't really experience it until it's truly yourself. For years, I saw my stutter as something standing in the way of, impact, connection, just feeling a little important in my environment. And ironically, it became the very thing that allowed me to connect so deeply with others, so many children I meet, so many teachers and schools I go to. It became the one thing that really helped me kind of meet people where they are. And it gave me a lot of empathy and patience and just awareness, and it just shaped me as who I am as a person right now. And finally, A in Zoya, I want to stand for advocating for others, especially because acceptance becomes very, very meaningful when it goes beyond yourself. It's not. It's not enough to simply say that everyone belongs, right? You want to kind of show it. You want to make sure that everyone's valued, and we should actively create environments where people feel safe, and not safe enough to just believe it. We don't have to show it as much. They just feel very comfortable from just being there. And I want this to go to especially children. A lot of the audience that I cater to are little kids, just because I feel like stigma and all these bullying and all these issues kind of start very, very young from their environment. So I want them to kind of realize that they are emotionally and physically very competent and they're just doing fine. And I feel like that should very start from the environments that we create for others.
Wow, what an incredible story. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you. I'm really, really sorry.
Oh, that's interesting.
Hello?
Um, I can hear you. So maybe drop out of the call and come back in. Okay? Drop out of the call and
Oh
come
my
back in.
God. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Go out and come back in. Sorry about that, everybody. Technology is great when it works, terrible when it doesn't. So we'll just wait for her to come back. Sometimes there is a disconnect with the sound. I could hear her clearly, but she couldn't hear me. So let's see if this is Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay. Technology is great when it works, it's terrible when it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
So I was just saying, what an incredible story. Now, can you share what growing up with a stutter was like for you emotionally?
Yeah, so emotionally, I felt like I kind of knew my place. It's not really something that I realized until meeting my classmates, the environment that I was in growing up, that kind of reinforced this feeling of like, oh, I am really different, and I don't know if people like me. So from the start, especially being at home and everything was very fine because people treated me very normally. But I think growing up in school and maybe going to new places, maybe other friends' houses, family houses, or whatnot, kind of getting out there in my environment very felt a little taxing for me, and I felt like I had to fix myself a lot just because I was treated so differently. And I don't know, it's not something I want other children to feel like, just because it was so mentally taxing and also at some point academically taxing. Like I mentioned, a lot of like my participation in school went down a lot, and this kind of what happens when shame and feeling excluded kind of gets to you at. So it affected how I participated in school and just how I opened up with people. And I think that also internalized my emotional sense of I just felt very depressed sometimes because I just felt like no one really understood where I'm coming from, my experiences or anything. And the only time I felt quite supported as who I am was in my speech therapy room, which also is why a lot of the work I do kind of caters to that sector because they truly do a lot for children who need the help. That was kind of the one of the couple rooms where I felt very seen, and I really want that to be common in all kinds of classrooms, regardless if they're special needs or speech education or whatever the classroom is. Yeah.
Mm, that's awesome. Now, was there a defining moment when you realized that yet your voice still mattered?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the time because I grew up kind of like looking at myself a little lowly, I think high school was when I kind of opened up a lot more.
Mhm.
Specifically in eighth grade when I kind of so a lot of speech students have IEPs, which are like they're attached to schools, so students who have speech differences or whatnot kind of get special accommodations, so extra time on tests or like presenting issues or like accommodations or whatnot. And eighth grade is kind of when I got out of the IEP, meaning I felt very confident in how I spoke. I felt like I grew a lot from my elementary school days. And I think once that IEP was gone for me, I think that's when I realized that I think I'm okay on my own. And my transition into high school was, I think, a lot more smoother because of that, just because I accepted that I did grow a lot. I think I realized that a lot from that transition just because one, the IEP disattachment, and also I feel like a lot of people around me noticed that I did grow a lot from my speech impediment. It was really, really bad when I was younger, but I think
Mm.
through a lot of the work and techniques that I went through all from elementary school and through middle school really did show. So I think from a little bit of external validation during that time period really did help. And in high school is also when a lot of people change in general and have a lot of academic progress to kind of grow in general. It's a very, very critical time period, and I felt like that was the perfect time where I could have done that. So yeah.
Nice. That's wonderful. Now, why is it important for you to create representation for children who stutter?
Yeah, I think it's very important because I think I mentioned a little bit ago too, but stigma and all these mental health issues kind of start very, very young.
Mm.
I want to make sure that all because along with all the stigma and whatnot comes mental health issues, feeling very small in a very large group of people. And I feel like that can be very limiting, especially to children. That's kind of we say that little children should always imagine worlds, create, be very, very creative. And feeling that sense from a very young age is very sad and very hurtful. I didn't feel like I could dream and imagine all the things I wanted to achieve just because I stuttered. So
Mm.
I kind of target my audience to a lot of little children just because that feeling can start very young and it can limit how they might see themselves in the future. And children who stutter, because as someone who stuttered myself, growing up, I didn't really have books to look back at and find inspiration and motivation from just because I loved reading so much. I felt like it was the only spaces that I could feel being myself. And
Yeah.
for a lot of students, that might be the case. So, for someone who might turn to art forms like reading or writing or whatnot, and not getting anything back or any validation or no, like nothing back is very
Mm.
hurtful.
That's
So,
right.
I want to make sure that children who stutter or don't stutter just feel different or want to find motivation from something, some art form such as books. I feel like I should be some kind of person to be there and kind of show that you don't really have to be a certain way to feel like you can dream and have all these goals. Yeah.
I love it. So, how did storytelling become a form of healing and empowerment for you?
Yeah, so in terms of healing, I feel like I always like from a young age I really liked those like school author visits or like storytelling like little
Mm.
sessions. It was like the one time where like the class would just go quiet and just listen. And
Wow.
I think I realized that like being up on stage in front of a school and speaking was the one of the couple times where I felt heard. Everyone just like looking at you, looking up at you, just hearing you speak and just share your story. And I think that was very internally healing because for so long I haven't. I never was able to feel that way. And so
Yeah.
I think storytelling just naturally became a way where I could be myself and share who I am without having something attached to it. So being kind of just like being up there and getting all the attention I want and I can
Mhm.
was very healing to me, and I think it was also very transformative. I think stories are something that's passed on for generations and generations. So
Yeah.
having my story shared in that manner is very kind of like touching. I'm really glad that some student among the hundreds in front of me will probably go home and see my book, buy my book, or even tell their kids or whatnot, or parents or whatnot about my story. So just having it kind of like ripple, even though it's small, is something very, very meaningful to me.
I like the way you're thinking. Generations ahead will be reading these books. That is so good. Now, what does the character Zoya represent to you personally?
Yeah, so Zoya, I think, so Zoya means being like resilient. That's what the name means, and that's kind of why I chose the name for the character in the story. And I think a lot of who she is very resilient. I look at her as a model, as my own role model, because
Mm.
I wish I was like her when I was younger. She was so strong. She's very courageous in the book. She goes through so many problems, and she never once feels like she was ever like small in herself. She always felt like she could do it. And I feel like for a lot of students that would be a lot very empowering, even to me. When if I was in and I read that story, I think I would find a lot of motivation and inspiration from. So Zoya as a character is very resilient. She tries no matter what. And she keeps going. She never, even if there's an obstacle, she pushes through and she makes sure that her voice is heard.
Mm.
Um, so yeah.
That's awesome. Now, what conversations has your book opened in schools and communities?
Yeah, so a lot of the schools that I go to do have like a special education or some kind of special like sector. And I think that's really interesting because I've also gone to speak in those classes specifically. And a
Okay.
lot of the schools that I do meet want to expand like awareness or like representation even within those classes and
Yeah.
general classes. So they are either looking to kind of combine everyone in the same environment, or they're just kind of empower those students in that specific class. And I think where I come in is sharing these stories. I also give material to classes like class curriculums, and
Mm.
my curriculums also focus on general classrooms and speech or special education classrooms. So
Mm.
it teaches everyone about neurodiversity, speech acceptance,
Yes.
disability. So kind of where I come in is kind of filling in that transitioning gap
Wow.
between viewing this other class and viewing the whole school. So a lot of teachers come to me and ask for maybe resources for their own classes to kind of show them that, hey, a lot of people are different and it's okay to be like that. And kind of educating students on that topic in general. And a lot of them also come to me just for finding my book cool. A lot of students, teachers might see that my book is very interesting and inspiring, even for a general class, even though it might not be for a specific group of people.
Yeah.
And I think just in general, I feel like my work kind of helps transition from seeing other people as different or outwardly and seeing how we standardize what people should be like. Yeah.
That's so inspiring. So, how do children typically respond when they hear your story?
Yeah, I think it's like one of my favorite questions. I think it's one of my favorite like reactions from students too. A lot of the time, so when I go to these talks, a lot of people don't really know who I am. So I introduce myself and I start speaking, and I think a lot of the time they ooh and ah. And I think I love that so much because like verbal like feedback, like they think it's so interesting. But
Yeah.
I think the most moving part is that after my talks, a lot of them kind of they so I'm not really old to them, or I hope I'm not at least, but I'm also a teenager. I'm not much older than them.
Yeah.
They're very young, but I'm also a student. I'm also a high schooler. I'm still a teenager. So I think seeing that like lack in age really connects me and my audience. And I think that's what kind of keeps it going because they see me as like an older sister almost. They come to me for a lot of things, and specifically after these talks, they give me little stickers or like little pins just to show like affection and stuff, and I think that's really cool. I
Yeah.
also get notes from teachers. They send like oh, like these students like loved your talk, or they loved your message, or like some students come up to me and ask questions like, oh, like how
Yeah.
did you find your book? I also have Q&A sessions, but sometimes there's so many questions that I take questions after the talk. So
Um,
at the end of the talk, in the beginning, they're so kind of like, oh, who is she? And then by the end, they're so homely almost. It's just so inviting for feedback, and just so so much happiness. They come to me, they ask me things, they give me things, and I think that's kind of my favorite part of being an author, especially a young author. I don't feel like I am different from them. I transform into a little kid myself when I speak to them.
um,
Yeah.
it. I love it. They can relate to you. So,
Yeah.
what role has the stuttering community played in your journey?
Yeah, so I actually so growing up I kind of just had my speech therapy like room or whatever. But I think in ninth grade before or like a little bit like after I wrote my first book was when I kind of got interested in like what groups are out there. I think another thing, I'm pretty sure there's also protocols for this, but growing up, I never was really introduced to stuttering groups or anything like that. It was
Wow.
just like me with the teacher, and kind of being 15, had no idea that there's like a national association about stuttering, and they have conferences every year and they have workshops and everything, and it was very eye-opening. I felt like, oh, I could have been part of this welcoming community so much earlier. And it was so great. They were so inviting. They featured my book. They a couple featured my book, actually three of them did. They all were so like welcoming, and they all were so happy that someone is making some kind of change in some way or form. And
Yeah.
I just really wish that I could have been part of it a little bit, just a little bit earlier, just so I think it would have helped me kind of have a community of my own and feel a little bit belonging, just because I didn't have that growing up as much. So it was great, it was wonderful. Yeah.
That's just beautiful. I love that. Now, what advice would you give to young people who feel different or misunderstood?
Yeah, I think the one thing to kind of learn from that is acceptance, and not
Mhm.
kind of, and acceptance meaning not settling for it, but kind of knowing that regardless of if you're different, that does not make you different from other people, or does not make you smaller, does not mean that you can't achieve the same thing, or if not greater things than other people. I think that's
Yeah.
a very easy assumption, just because you're set apart from people by one difference, or by one thing, or by a couple things, or just something that you find different from others. And that could
Yes.
be a very big setback, just because that's something that's physically separating you from someone else or some other group. So I think being in that stance, just knowing that you are still capable and that you are still so achieving, is very important. And it will take a long time, but I would probably recommend like looking out and finding motivation of some sort. My outlet was reading and writing, specifically reading from a young age, and just in anywhere form, kind of learning that you are competent and that you can achieve things, and finding motivation from whatever you can and whatever that you can do. Yeah.
That's beautiful. So, how can parents and educators better support children with speech disorders?
Yeah, specifically with speech, I feel like it's very easy to finish their sentences. That's
Wow.
something that I did not like growing up. I felt very cut off. I felt like I could not speak for myself.
Yeah.
That's a very important skill to have from a very young age. You should be able to advocate for yourself and speak for yourself, and having other people kind of butt in and finish your sentence and stuff is kind of like, I don't know, like it kind of shows like the inferiority and superiority complex. So
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing that I would specifically say not to do when meeting someone with a speech difference. Just let them have their time. Another thing is kind of not talking to them that like they're lower. I feel like a lot of the time when, yeah, like looking down at them, I feel like a lot of the time when I speak, they kind of baby me and they think that I can't speak for myself or on my own. They kind of like, I don't know, it's just very like belittling. Like just like knowing that they're also normal, that they're also a person, and they're just a little bit struggling to get words out.
Yeah.
And kind of also offering a space of just being themselves. So just allowing them to like in any form connect with you,
Yeah.
kind of not showing any like superiority or like authority over them, just like
Wow.
making sure that they're like they feel belonging in the environment, and they feel heard and seen. And I feel like a lot of the steps that take a lot of the steps that they might need to take for that to happen is to kind of just respect who they are as they are. Like I mentioned, not finishing their sentences, kind of like listening, active listening is very important, even though they might take a little bit longer, just showing that you're listening and like that you agree or disagree or just like verbal feedback or anything, just to show that you are present in the moment. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. People will finish off the sentences thinking they're helping a child.
Yeah. Yep.
Meanwhile, it's just eroding their self-confidence even more,
Exactly.
right? Oh, that's
Exactly.
really sad.
Yeah.
Now, what impact do you hope your work will have over the next 10 years? What's your
Yeah.
vision?
Yeah. So I think like a lot of the work I do is for representation. So maybe seeing a little bit more of a variety of representation in children's books. I know
Yeah,
that is emerging. Like it has taken a long time, and it still will take a long time, I think. But just seeing a couple more authors or companies or anyone out there putting out a little more books on maybe the unique differences that we see in our society, that would be very nice. And also, I think classroom culture and like social culture, I think
yeah,
I hope to change. Like I mentioned, like viewing people as a little lower than you just because they're different, or in
yeah,
classrooms kind of excluding someone because they are different in some sort or some form. I feel like that can kind of increase stigma related to that difference, and that's a very long path to kind of fix from.
yeah,
So kind of just making sure that any difference is welcomed and that they don't feel like very like different from that. And
yeah.
I know that there's only so much impact that a teenager can make right now, but hopefully in the next 10 years I maybe publish more books, I maybe do more educational policy work or something, because
Yeah.
I feel like it's a very important issue that I feel like gets a little under the pile of rocks sometimes. So, children's books are very important. They're very valuable for children confidence, how they are shaped from a young age. So
Yeah.
kind of seeing that ramp up in terms of what kind of characters are represented in them is probably a big step that I hope to see soon.
It's beautiful. Now, if you could speak directly to your younger self, based on what life has taught you up until this point, what three nuggets of wisdom would you give her?
Yeah. Um, Oh, I think the first nugget is I think that she's not alone. I feel like when I was younger, I felt like I was the only one who stuttered, or the only couple people in my school who stuttered, and it just felt like I was alone sometimes. So I think the first thing is that you're not alone. If you're struggling through anything, if you're different in any sort or way or form, you're not the only one going through that. The second thing is that I am still very achieving and I can still do amazing, wonderful things. I feel like growing up, because I kind of came into myself and I um, just didn't really know how to express myself in a social setting. I kept to myself. I felt like I couldn't really achieve things just also because I saw the clear separation between myself and others. I think kind of like dissolving that barrier and learning that I am just as normal as other people are, and other people might view me, and that we're all as amazing as everyone else. And third nugget is that our differences are always not our disadvantages. Um, my difference was clear, I think is clearly my advantage. I feel like I can make a lot of change through that. And I feel like a lot of people who might seem different can also make change through a lot of ways. From my experiences, from growing up without having the books I wanted, from growing up feeling a little alone and not feeling heard or seen, and almost in all the aspects of my life, I feel like I've changed that completely being a teenager now. So knowing that your difference can only make way for more positive, impactful changes for many others in the world is something I wanted to probably also tell.
That's so beautiful. Well, listen, thank you so much, Sathvega, for coming online and sharing your story. It always inspires me when I find someone as young as you out there in the world making a difference and helping and supporting others along the way. I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We're a social impact movement that brings you the stories and voices of people from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift you, to inspire you, to energize you, but most importantly, to help take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So if you are a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're a caregiver, and you're looking for a book that has a difference, please reach out. Where can people buy the book?
Yeah, it's all over Amazon. I have both my books available. The Zoya the Stuttering Star is my first one, and then The Sky is My Easel is the second one. Yeah.
Fantastic. So people know where to get your book. Or if you know someone who has little children, birthdays are coming up, Christmas is coming up, buy this book and put it in those Christmas stockings. Children need to see other children who are different and understand that we have to celebrate our diversity and our differences as well. I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody, with yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And thank you again for this interview. Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.